One of my earliest memories is from when I was 6 years old, and my godfather introduced me to the extraordinary ocean expeditions of Jacques Cousteau. I knew from that time on I was going to be a scientist. I grew up in Lake Tahoe, so I spent a lot of time in the outdoors, and I discovered a passion and a curiosity for nature. Now, I just recently celebrated my 45th birthday, and I am okay with that milestone birthday because I'm very proud of how I spent the first part of my life. I spent over almost 30 years aiming to diagnose and heal the environment. I even became a doctor along the way. Not a medical doctor, but a doctorate of the environment because I wanted to protect and heal the beautiful landscapes that I loved. The extraordinary, spectacular ones like this. You locals out there, you can back me up by assuring that no, this is not an AI-generated photograph. This is Tahoe in all its glory. Mark Twain once said, surely the fairest picture the whole world can afford. And I think you'll all agree, based on this picture, that it is definitely worth protecting. But Tahoe, like the rest of the world, is experiencing outside external threats, like global warming, extreme weather patterns, long periods of drought followed by intense storms, and the threat of catastrophic wildfire. Here in Tahoe, I run an environmental organization where we focus on protecting the lake. You may have seen our stickers. Keep Tahoe Blue is our iconic slogan, and that's what we've been doing for over 65 years. But over the last 10 years or so, we've learned a couple of things. One, how we are currently traditionally protecting the environment is not going to cut it anymore. And two, we may need to look to unconventional, non-traditional solutions in order to keep up with the pace and scale of climate change. And because I'm a scientist, and I filled my team with scientists, we practice the scientific process in order to learn. So we collect data and information, we analyze and assess that data, and then we adapt and learn and create new solutions. This is a photograph from maybe a typical weekend day going up to Tahoe, traffic-y. You might have experienced this elsewhere. It's common, it's becoming more common even. Traffic is not a new thing, but it's becoming more consistent, more common throughout the year rather than just seasonal. That started happening before the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic, more people are getting outside, which I think is fantastic. I love that people are getting out, but that means this is more common, and it's putting more pressure on our systems. In Tahoe, we get 15 million annual visits. That's 4 times more than Yosemite. And it's not just annoying to sit in traffic, it's also an environmental impact. Air pollution, yes, but for places like Tahoe, runoff from our urban landscape, specifically from our roadways, is the #1 threat to our beautiful blue water. So it's obvious we need to get those cars off the road if we're going to protect the lake. In Tahoe, like elsewhere, we have a typical bus system, big buses down a main drag. They come in frequently if they come on time, and they're often empty. So we needed to look to other solutions to protect the lake. So we decided to turn to a system we were seeing popping up in other communities, other metropolitan areas like San Francisco. And we brought up a pilot in 2018 of microtransit. So microtransit is an on-demand, app-based system that brings the rides to the rider when and where they need it. And 2018, spoiler alert, it didn't work very well. I know I just spent some time telling you we need to be creative and bring new, non-traditional solutions to keep up with our environmental challenges. But in this case, just because it didn't work very well doesn't mean it wasn't successful. Sometimes big swings and misses will help us learn and adapt so that we could have success down the road. Okay, bear with me for a minute. I'm going to be cliche. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you get annoyed when you ask why things are done a certain way and people respond with, because that's how we've always done it. Let's see, hands. Okay, that's even more than I thought. Yeah, it's super annoying, isn't it? And it's that sort of thinking that's preventing us from getting new solutions and keeping us with inadequate options to solve our environmental issues. Like this typical traditional way of protecting wildlife, where we build fences of barbed wire to keep wildlife in, keep people out, and it often doesn't work. You could tell this guy, he doesn't like it. He's trying to escape. If he's lucky, he'll get out. If he's not lucky, he may have a more tragic ending. It doesn't allow for connectivity, and sometimes it even encourages the actual behavior we're trying to prevent. This is Beauty. I know, a very ironic name. She is a bald eagle who lost her beak when she was shot by a poacher in Alaska. And when she was in captivity, her caretakers found an unusual, non-conventional solution for her. They created a prosthetic beak from a 3D printer. Looks pretty good, right? You can't even tell that's not real. And it actually worked. She was able to eat and drink on her own. And it gave her 16 more years of life. And her caretakers didn't even have to create a solution out of thin air. They were able to turn to other technologies and repurpose. She teaches us that we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but we can turn to other technologies, other human technologies for solutions. Or better yet, we could even turn to nature, because after all, she is the best engineer. Take, for example, humpback whales. They use this very interesting way of capturing fish. They will dive deep under the water, under a school of fish, and one of them will blow bubbles out of her blowhole and create a bubble net. And this bubble net will push the fish to the surface, and then other members can gulp up the fish that have been captured and entrapped in that bubble net. It's pretty remarkable. Fishermen in the last century also thought it was remarkable, and they borrowed this technique and create artificial engineered bubble nets in the open water to harvest fish. We also see this technology used in places like the Netherlands, where they create bubble curtains to keep salt water from intruding into freshwater systems. In Tahoe, our beautiful blue water is turning green. I mentioned earlier that one of the biggest threats was from runoff coming into the water, bringing in pollutants and nutrients. Another threat is aquatic invasive weeds that are establishing in our shoreline. They're creating a more nutrient-rich environment, which means there's more algal growth. And these weeds are being transported by boats. And a lot of those boats are coming from some of the bigger marinas. And the marinas are ground zero for these weeds. So while we figure out how to get rid of the weeds in the marinas, we need to figure out how we can slow down the spread of the weeds out of the marina channels. My colleague was at a convention at a conference a couple years ago, and he went to a session on biomimicry. Biomimicry is just mimicking nature. And he learned about these bubble curtains. And he thought, if we could use them to keep salt water out of fresh water, maybe we could use them to keep things in. We could reverse that. So we worked with some engineers and had a prototype developed of a bubble curtain that we brought to Tahoe and installed it in one of the marina channels. And because everything we do, we make sure we're following a scientific process, we gathered data on the effectiveness of this bubble curtain. In that first year, we found it actually worked pretty darn well. It captured a lot of the weeds behind the curtain, prevented them from flowing out, and it even allowed boats to go in and out, and it would pull the weeds off the boats. So we could calculate how much was staying in, how much was leaving, adapt along the way. We continue to learn. We even installed a double bubble curtain, because double the fun, better the protection. And we've been improving along the way, and we will continue to do that. So thank you, humpback whales, for keeping Tahoe blue. Ecosystems aren't isolated. To protect the water, we also have to protect the land. And this is a picture in Tahoe in the summer. Sometimes Tahoe beaches are loved a little too much, a little more than they can handle. And after holidays like this one's the 4th of July, you can see the impact. There's trash left over, and a lot of it's small trash. So we started a volunteer program a little over 10 years ago, and our volunteers have been picking up trash, and they're really good at it. They literally, pun intended, literally pick up tons of trash. In fact, this year, they just picked up their 100,000th pound of trash from our programs. And we're learning about what they're picking up, because again, collecting data and information, learning what they're picking up and where they're picking it up. And we found out that there is over 60% of the trash is plastic. We've also learned from our research partners at places like UC Davis, University of Nevada, Reno, Desert Research Institute, that we have a microplastic problem in the lake. So it's imperative that we prevent that trash, those plastics, from getting into the lake. Now, we've worked with our land partners up here and the regional planning agency to develop new programs, and people are trashing the beaches much less, but you still can't pick up what you can't see. So we turned to a new technology, and in this case, it was something out of kind of like a Disney movie or a sci-fi movie, a beach cleaning robot. We call him the Bee-Bot. And we brought him in with a non-traditional partner, a startup company called EcoClean Solution, who imported this idea, this technology, from a company in France. And it's been remarkable. It is a remarkable, impressive device. It's working pretty well. It is remote operated, solar powered. It can clean a beach in less than half a day. And it sifts up to about 4 inches of sand. And it's a great educational tool. People see it on the beach and want to know what it is, so we have an opportunity to educate, change behavior, and improve our problem directly related to trash. We even wanted to see how much better it was at picking up trash from our great volunteers. So we did a man versus robot competition, and we found, as great as our volunteers are, they pick up a lot of trash. The robot picked up 10 times more of that smaller trash than our volunteers did. Picked up things like cigarette butts, like small pieces of plastic. So there we're getting that plastic out, plastic straws, pistachios, a whole bunch of stuff. And this stuff probably would have made it into the lake if we weren't willing to try a new solution, to invest in a different technology, to change our thinking, to not do things the way we always have just because that's how we've always done it. Because if we keep doing things just because they've always been done that way, we might still be dumping motor oil into the ground. In the 1960s, this was best practice. We were told to bury our motor oil when it was used. Even Popular Science magazine told us to do that. Can you imagine if we still did that today? We know now that it's a big environmental impact. And that even if a little bit of that motor oil gets into the ground, it can contaminate an entire drinking water system. So we need to think about new technologies, find opportunities to try new things, maybe non-traditional, unconventional, and be okay with failure, because failure is how we learn. We can fail forward and have great opportunity to find new solutions. I'll go back to my microtransit example. Microtransit, that on-demand, app-based service that brings the ride to the rider when they need it. We brought it here in 2018. It didn't work very well. The app was clunky, and we don't have great broadband in Tahoe. It didn't always show up. But you know what? When it did show up, people were stoked to use it. They were really excited to get out of their car and not have to drive. So it told us that maybe there was some glitches we needed to fix, but people were willing to use this new opportunity to get out of their cars. So we worked over time to address some of those issues, adapt, share our lessons, and now there's over 3 growing microtransit systems in Lake Tahoe, and we're starting to get people out of their cars to protect the lake. Let's discover new ways to protect the environment through curiosity, getting comfortable, being uncomfortable with risk, learning along the way to find new solutions, and when we do, we can be successful in keeping Tahoe blue and protecting the spectacular natural resources that we love.